Is the US the new Rome? In a lovely bit of cosmic irony, the first book of Edward Gibbon's ambitious 6-volume work, The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, was published in 1776, on the eve of the birth of a new empire, one that would go on to become arguably the most powerful in history. In some ways, the United States and the Roman Empire do have a lot in common.
Behold, dear Petronius!
But first, we need to address what the end of an empire actually looks like. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, the fall of Rome. Despite the popularity of the phrase, most academics have moved on from the term fall when talking about the Roman Empire. The consensus now is that it wasn't any single inflection point that triggered a dramatic collapse, but an agonizing, generations-long slide into a decreased standing in the world. There wasn't one single point where we could say Rome was an empire yesterday and today it's a failed project. The real world doesn't work like that. There were certainly some instances one could point to as chapter markers near the end of the story. For example, around the year 476, there wasn't really an emperor claiming the vast swaths of land the empire had once held with an iron fist. But if we're looking for a Marvel-esque announcement that Rome has fallen, we're not gonna find one. What we can trace, and it's easier to do so in retrospect, is a series of minor failures that go unaddressed. Crumbling infrastructure due to lack of investment, rampant corruption, severe inequality, dwindling trust in institutions or leadership, humiliating military defeat, or endless conflict sapping resources. These all add up to a very real challenge to the structure of an empire. To take the Roman example, the city of Rome itself had been sacked multiple times, but what really did the city in was when the supply chain failed. State-subsidized grain shipments on state-subsidized ships tied up at state-subsidized docks. Eventually, as the state was less able or willing to maintain these mundane but crucial projects, things sort of just fell apart over time. It's never one big collapse, it's death by 1,000 cuts. Countless seemingly insignificant failures that together add up to an inability to function. A useful way to think about this can be found in Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy, which is now actually a really good show if you're into sci-fi. Much like Harry Seldon prophesied a series of crises along the path of the Empire's long and painful collapse, so too can we take a step back and see a handful of big red dots on the timeline of American decline. I don't want to spoil the show, but suffice it to say that it has a really good understanding of the scale we're talking about when looking at the process of decline. It's not a quick and dramatic collapse. These things take decades or even centuries, but the cracks are already there. And every once in a while, a pillar buckles. The Great Depression, the Red Scares and McCarthyist pogroms, 9/11, the 2008 financial crash and Great Recession, COVID, and now the handful of crises that have been simmering for decades and are coming to a head, the climate crisis and the collapse of US imperial control of the periphery. We're losing ground economically, militarily, and geopolitically to China. The US regime's steadfast support for the genocide of the Palestinian people has ensured no country in the Third World will ever believe our rhetoric about self-determination and freedom again. Just like that, an entire generation of Americans disabused of the myth that we're the good guys. And this is where the usual Western analysis begins to fail. A lot of people make the mistake of attributing crises of empire to the failures or excesses of individual leaders or people or groups with influence. It's always the other team that's making things go wrong. It's Trump on immigration and LGBT rights. It's Biden on funding endless proxy wars.